Dr. Horowitz is the preeminent researcher when it comes to emerging viruses, when it comes to public health, when it comes to safety and what's important. He's no less the author of 17 incredible nationally and internationally best-selling books. With him is the incredible Sherri Kane, who also is an investigative journalist who's looking at media manipulation. They are incredible. Please welcome the very wonderful Dr. Leonard Horowitz and Sherri Kane.
I want to introduce, it's my privilege to introduce an extraordinary investigative journalist who defected early from Fox News after she realized what it was all about from LA. And she's not a fan of Rupert Murdoch, as you can read from her writings. This is Sherri Kane, and I can tell you that I really love Sherri. The reality is that I don't believe that anybody's come to bat for me more than Sherri Kane. And in the process of coming to bat for me, she's really come to bat for everybody. She's come to bat for we the people. She's come to bat for the Patriot movement. She's come to bat for the Christian movement. She has come to bat for the 9/11 truth movement. The information that we're going to expose today is largely because of Sherri Kane's brilliant investigative research. And I believe because of that, she's pulled the veil off of the entire conspiracy industry. So tonight's presentation is an extraordinary one, and I welcome Sherri Kane to the podium for the first time.
Thank you. I have to say it's a great privilege to work with Dr. Horowitz. He is a true genius and also an amazing investigative journalist. I think he's been a great asset to humanity, and he is a true hero. Today we're going to present on different things, and we're going to start out with the Gulf disaster. Dr. Horowitz and I were featured on Jesse Ventura's True TV as a couple of expert journalists who really uncovered that it was an inside job. It's like preaching to the choir here, I know, but the masses don't know that, and hopefully we can go and reach out to people beyond this room who are still listening to what the mainstream media tells them to be the truth, which is really the conspiracy theory. We are the conspiracy reality, and the mainstream media is the conspiracy theory. It's kind of flipped around, and we're going to talk about how everything is flipped around today. In the Gulf oil catastrophe, there was crisis capitalism involved. In case you don't know what crisis capitalism is, it's when the globalists actually create the problem and then create the solution for the problem. And that's what happened here, and it happened in 9/11 as well. We're going to talk about who was really responsible in having this happen, and how and why, or what it's all about. Pollution, biological intoxications, depopulation.
You know, the matter of when you consider pollution, global pollution, and the agenda, it comes directly out of the report from Iron Mountain. It's been urged that people from all walks of life read that allegedly leaked humorous satire, which it was not. It was a leaked document. It was published by the Dial Press. Leonard Lewin was a scholar. When you read it, you see there's no humor in it whatsoever. It is laying out exactly what has happened over the past 30 years since its publication, actually a little bit more than that in the 1960s. So you see that globalization involved massive global pollution as one of the manners in which the globalists would bring the people all over the world together against common foes. There was pollution. There was the alien phenomenon, the extraterrestrial risks. There was also the plagues, the great global plagues. And of course, there's other things such as biological warfare that, of course, and biological outbreaks from labs, such as what we're witnessing currently with the EU problem with the E. coli. And so that this is all part and parcel of bringing the globalization process for the urging for one world government, which this presentation today also deals heavily with, the manner in which propaganda and the mainstream media is spun, and organizations such as this are infiltrated by agent provocateurs and propagandists, including those that promote the Illuminati as an issue, that promote the malfeasance of public officials, including the Bush family, all of those issues that you and I, over the past, pretty much, if you've been at it as long as I have, let's say 20 years, involved in the conspiracy matters, all of you and I believe the same things about the foes, and we're going to share with you today that that is an agenda. We are all, in essence, brainwashed, mind-controlled, and grossly deceived. The biological intoxications also employ weapons of mass destruction for depopulation, and it is no mystery when you see on YouTube people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and those Ted Turners of the world talking about the need for global depopulation because of the shortage of resources and the increasing pollution associated with populations. That's a bunch of bunk. You and I know it. There's a massive amount of resources that have been untapped that include those that have been suppressed. The free energy technologies, the Tesla technologies, of course, the new revelations that we've advanced with 528 and the miracles of the way the universe is run involve musical mathematics. All of this has been suppressed, and we're now advancing all the research to expose it.
Industrial sabotage, industrial espionage, sabotage, and CIA. Transocean, Halliburton, British Petroleum, Goldman Sachs. How were they involved? They were all involved in the Gulf oil disaster. Every one of them. This was an inside job, and we can blame the Bushes, we can blame Goldman Sachs, and we can blame the Rothschild League of Bankers for this disaster. The conflicts of interest, Deepwater Horizon, which was the Mississippi Canyon 252, which was the property of Transocean. British Petroleum, they owned the oil. Halliburton, the cementation job and the detonation, the companies that are financially directed by Goldman Sachs, such as JP Morgan and UBS investment bankers, all operating in the Rothschild League of Bankers. Peter Sutherland was the Pope's economic advisor and also Goldman Sachs' international director and the director of BP. And then also Transocean contracted Halliburton via Bush and Cheney.
So all of these organizations made vast fortunes off of crisis capitalism. The creating of the problem, the creating of the solution, and how it fits perfectly in with the globalization agenda for pollution, hideous pollution, and human intoxication that leads to depopulation.
Halliburton officials admitting knowing their cementation job was likely to explode according to congressional testimony. 3 weeks before the natural gas leak, the Bush-Cheney Halliburton Company negotiated the purchase of the world's largest oil spill cleanup company, Boots & Coots. Then, Apollo Investment Group, which co-owns Nalco, Corexit, with Goldman Sachs, joined Rockefeller Exxon in 1994. Goldman Sachs officials knew the rig was likely to explode when they bet millions of dollars on this event before it happened, and Lloyd Blankfein, who's the CEO of Goldman Sachs, directed 44%, which is 4.6 million shares of BP stock to be dumped 3 weeks before the explosion.
Now, if you've studied Sherri Kane's earlier investigations and our collaboration in reporting on what we'll talk about in a minute, the Partnership for New York City, which links intimately to 9/11 catastrophe. The Apollo Investment Group is virtually where the money went. You may have heard that the entire financial dealings with having to do with the destruction of the World Trade Center towers, along with the reconstruction funds, were all to be managed by the Partnership for New York City, literally. And that this partnership, we'll mention in a minute, had major investors in Apollo Investment Group. So you begin to see that those who are pulling the strings on Wall Street, and from the top down through the Rothschild League of Banksters, in this case, you have these people, again, conducting this crisis capitalism, and you can follow the money directly through this private equity investment organization, Apollo Management, that brought the money to MGM Grand Hotel in Las Vegas, that then constructed the Veer Towers and the new city center. That's called the Center of the New World on their website. It's the city center. It's Las Vegas's #1 newest attraction, and it heralds 2 leaning towers that when they opened it, it was draped in red, white, and blue in the evening. It was lit up, red, white, and blue, and it appears to be falling into rubble. And that rubble, if you take a tour of that place you will find is owned by the world's wealthiest store owners, the Gucci's, etc. So that's the rubble. It's a monument. What you're looking at in Las Vegas at the city center is a virtual monument that was never built in New York. It was built in Las Vegas.
So you can actually go and research online. We have it online at waronwethepeople.com. So if you could take a note of that, it's a great website. You can get a lot of information. It's pretty much one of our newest websites that we put up.
And so what was happening is, in terms of this Transocean connection, if you remember, again, Sherri mentioned a minute ago that the Halliburton company did the cementation job and the demolition job. You had Transocean that owned the oil rig, and you had the Goldman Sachs connections, of course, to Dick Cheney and Halliburton company, which, by the way, was featured, surprisingly, on Jesse Ventura's program, True TV, and the conspiracy show did not want to go into greater details, however, about Goldman Sachs. They suppressed that, but they did have me share, and Sherri, they acclaimed for having tipped them to this story, and Jesse Ventura himself said, you know, Sherri Kane's story checked out. And the manner in which they made a lot of money, not all of it, because as Sherri said, that Blank Fine at Goldman Sachs unloaded stocks. The director of BP likewise unloaded a ton of stocks before the event, shortly before the event. But what was surprising that nobody else had reported on was what I had discovered when I began to investigate it. Dealt with Transocean's put options that were placed in place about 24 hours before the oil rig exploded. 24 hours, they put a put option through the Eurex exchanges. That means the top officials in the European stock market, they had an inside knowledge about this. Of course, Peter Sutherland had to have known also, being the major player that he is. And he runs Goldman Sachs International, as well as being the advisor to the Pope. And of course, he's also heavily involved in the directorship of BP Oil. So clearly, Sutherland would have known about the put options on Transocean Company, and that it allowed them to, for $2.50, about 12 to 24 hours before the explosion, secure the highest price of their stock. It was over $50 a share, and as that stock then tumbled down to about low 30s, I think it was, or mid 30s, by the end of the challenge, they would have made vast fortunes off of that put option that was synchronously timed to the demolition.
So it's important, as you know, in all of these disasters to follow the money, because that's where the truth is going to be. And in this case, it was with the Rothschild League of Bankers, Bush Cheney Halliburton cartel, Wall Street's leading investment bankers at Goldman Sachs, and the Partnership for New York City. The Partnership for New York City is responsible for rebuilding the World Trade Center. It's a David Rockefeller Foundation that has Lloyd Blankfein and Rupert Murdoch as the co-chairman. If you look at who Lloyd Blankfein is and who Rupert Murdoch is and all the people that are on the board of directors, you'll find that they are all media as well as pharmaceutical players. Rupert Murdoch has the Murdoch Children's Research Institute in Australia that conducted some of the first swine flu vaccination trials on children. And he also is the CEO of Fox, as well as a lot of other major media entities.
Yes, News Corp is, of course, one of the major conglomerates of the media. You're looking at everything from HBO to Warner Brothers, Time Warner. Also, this link between ABC, Disney, Miramax. All of those mergers came by Goldman Sachs, Lloyd Blankfein, who maintained a lot of shares in the stock. When you're talking about ABC, Disney, Miramax, of course, you've got to include Michael Moore. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes.
Murdoch's complete family is actually involved in the pharmaceutical cartel. His son, James, is the non-executive director of SmithKline Beecham, which is supposedly the competitor for who Murdoch is involved with, which is...
CSL Labs is with Merck. They're a subsidiary of Merck Pharmaceutical Company. And SmithKline Beecham, of course, is supposed to be a competitor. His son, James, is James Murdoch is the non-executive director for that.
And his mother, Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, the whole family is involved. I mean,
People don't know that they're involved in the pharmaceutical cartel. And then Lloyd Blankfein is the biggest funder of AstraZeneca flu mist,